Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors, experts in the biggest questions in tech. This is Making Revenue Tick. Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tick. We are delighted to be joined by someone I've only met very recently, but I feel has become a really good friend straight away. Conor Douglas, how are you doing?
All good on my side.
So when Conor and I met, we've had some wonderful conversations about Conor's career, the journey that he's been on, some of his principles and beliefs, the ways that he's helped businesses. And I loved it so much that I'm like, man, we have to do like some content. We've got to go and take these stories and then share them with the world because I think there's so much value. And one of the big themes of many things that we talked about was that you really love helping businesses to expand into EMEA and making that sort of global expansion play that businesses all dream of becoming a reality. And I'd just love to know, why is that topic of expansion into EMEA one that's close to your heart?
Yeah, I suppose I have the privilege of like working with HubSpot for 11 years, right? And I had the opportunity probably in 2024 to go, you know what, I wouldn't mind taking a bit of time out and reflecting on my career and just realizing like what I want to do. And that time has given me the opportunity to go, you know what, of the 11 years that I worked with HubSpot, like what was I most energized by? What was I most enthused by? And really like those early days of just figuring out processes, figuring out systems, iterating on a system that just wasn't working, figuring out something really quickly, just figuring out how to lay track really quickly and then on to the next thing was just something that I thrived in, you know? So yeah, like that is definitely the area of a company life cycle that I'm most suited to. I just loved it. I just loved those early stages of building out the starting points of an EMEA team and making that team, growing that team to a point where it's 8 people and we're hiring a leader for that team. Then 12 to 24 months later, that team setting up an office that might go into Berlin, that might go into Madrid. That was just a really, really exciting time and had its whole host of challenges, but at the same time, like just so rewarding. So I think when you look at where HubSpot is now and the company it is today, it's like it's a machine, it's a big engine. And I think I made the call that I didn't want to kind of pursue on that road. And I made the call that I want to get back into those kind of early stages with the company again. And I'm on that journey right now.
It's amazing. And I think it's one of the things that really clicked and resonated with me is that my own story is that I was part of a business for 12 years. And like, it's amazing to be part of that growth journey. Like it wasn't anywhere near as impressive in terms of growth, but we went from like 50 people to 450 globally. And I got that chance to work in international offices and open up business units. So I really empathize and like connected with what you were saying, because they were just such incredible times. And candidly, we got to a point where it became more about establishing repeatable processes to scale efficiently and repeatably, rather than it was about that kind of like figuring stuff out. And the way you've described it with your passion, you touched on a couple of things which I really love. I'm sure any listeners that have tuned in before would immediately know why I asked you to come onto the podcast, because you are the intrapreneur, which is like our whole motto as a business. And what the podcast is all about is like finding these intrapreneurial people who are building businesses from the inside. And they take that level of ownership and innovation and collaboration and alignment, but with a load of like deep connection to the fact that we're doing something for a bigger cause. It's not like lone wolf mentality. We just want to be successful and ambitious at all stages. We're trying to build something for everyone. And that really shines through. You also mentioned about the fact that you reflected after a really long, successful stint in what's one of the most respected and admired companies in the world, to go, what energized you? Because as we go through our careers, we collect skills and we collect responsibilities and we collect things that we are able to go and do, capabilities. that we could easily just go and continue to do. But maybe some of those things don't give us strength. They're not our true strengths. They might drain us. And Marcus Buckingham talks about that in Love and Work. They're called grey threads, things that we're good at, but they drain us and we procrastinate over. And then the red threads, which is what you shone through when you talked about it, is the stuff that ignited you and that you got fired up about and that you would love to go and get involved in more. And when I talk about that concept around you being an entrepreneur, finding those red threads, you're so clear on the type of businesses that you want to help. What's coming to your mind?
Yeah, I suppose what comes to mind is like when you are at that early stage, like I was one of the first internal leadership promotions within HubSpot, and you had a huge amount of autonomy to go and like just figure out and put your brain power into what's required to kind of like grow out that EMEA presence, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about the red thread there, like you're firing on all cylinders at any one point in time, you know, all of those challenges that come with that EMEA market entry experience is just huge. And just the innovation that has to take place at that level, is just something that like massively energizes me. If you can kind of contrast that to, you know, a company that is fully established, they have a lot of these systems and processes figured out. They know the profile of candidate that they're looking for, all of that stuff. When that's figured out, I'm kind of not at my best, you know, I'm not the leader that I want to be. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out. And yeah, the prospect of getting back in the trenches with a company again, figuring all that out with the experience that I have this time from HubSpot, like I'm massively buzzing by that, because if you think about it, the first time round, it was a lot of guesswork, you know, let's guess that as a strategy and let's try and roll that out as a strategy. Oh, okay, that failed. Okay, let's iterate on that and do something different. Like actually bringing that experience into that scenario again is just, it's crazy exciting for me.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Well, it'll be amazing in this conversation to maybe unpick that story. But for anyone who doesn't already have the pleasure of knowing you, Conor, give us like that understanding of the journey that you've been on in your career.
Yeah, so I am your probably atypical tech sales representative profile in Dublin, right? So started out in a Microsoft distributor, a company called Osmosis that no longer exists. They evolved into a CCTV company. Spent 2 years there just selling OEM software to PC system builders across Ireland. So if you think about, that was a time where Dell were selling laptops for $399 and desktops for $499, or whatever the case might be. I'm trying to sell a load of components to a guy who's trying to build PCs and remain competitive against Dell's offering. So it was a tough sale, but it was something that shaped me. It was something that, if I can kind of win in this market and get a bit of traction going, I can do anything. Do you know? I had that belief coming out of that type of role, and it's something that really stood to me. From there, I moved into Dell. I was in Dell for 2 years, just like selling everything from your laptops, your desktops, to your servers and softwares. And then from there, I moved into Oracle. Did 5 years in Oracle. Very different animal, not as fast paced as Dell, just like longer sales cycles, more enterprise level conversations, and more stakeholder management. Love my time in Oracle, but came a time in 2013 where, do I continue on this road? Do I look to get into the field with Oracle? Do I continue my career in enterprise sales, or do I just try something a little bit different? And at that time, there was a lot of my peers that were going to the sky blue of Salesforce. Salesforce were putting out these big salaries, really enticing. but it just seemed like a lot of more the same. It felt like Salesforce was going the same direction as Oracle. It was built on the same kind of principles. Benioff was ex-Oracle. And I just wanted to play a more integral role in a company. And that's why I started to look around. And then this really interesting company, HubSpot, was coming into Dublin. And I had a friend that had joined them, and she referred me. And surprisingly enough, she'll hate me for saying this now, but she left the company on the day I joined. And I was like, what's going on here, right? So she just, in fairness to her, she had a massive opportunity to go and set up a business with her sister, and she just said it was her passion project. So that's why she was leaving. But nonetheless, it did kind of shake me back then. But it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. I joined as employee number 26. I was one of the first internal promotions in there in 2015. Was with a team there for probably 6 or 7 years in the channel and mid-market. And then in 2022, I approached my international head of sales about progression and what do I need to do to develop to the next level. And he goes, Conor, you've tapped out this year with a real high-performing team, but I want you to take on a challenge. I want you to take on something just that's completely out of your comfort zone. And back then, the challenge was corporate in HubSpot. So if you think about HubSpot, its DNA is very much in small business, mid-market, and corporate was very much in its infancy. So I was one of the first corporate leadership promotions. Worked on a team there that had a very difficult start to the year. 2022 was very difficult economically. It was a tough time, but put a few basic structures in place, managed to turn things around, managed to land some pretty big deals, which is always good in enterprise. And we turned things around and delivered on the team number. I did another year in the corporate business. And then at the back end of 2023, that was my 10th year. I just decided that, do you know what? I just want a little bit of a break from this. And there was an ex-global head of sales that was a great guy in HubSpot that always gave me the advice that if you're going to continue in this for a long period of time, Conor, make sure you take a break. Make sure you take a bit of time out, and you'll have the experience behind you. And I had 20 years experience at that stage. I had real solid story with HubSpot. So I decided to back myself. So in April of last year, I took a step away from things. I've got 2 small kids, so I was right in the thick of it. There wasn't really any downtime. It wasn't really just take a break from it all. It was, but it was the best decision that I ever made. So 2024 was a time to just reflect, like what did I want out of my next step in the journey? I'm very clear on that now, and it's kind of taken me up to a point where I'm having conversations with you about it.
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's unpick that, because I know that we've covered the whole, particularly the HubSpot story in a really quick way, and I think it would be really fascinating to get under the hood of that one. Just out of curiosity, so you joined as employee, what was it, 26?
26, yeah.
And how large had that grown to at the point that you decided to leave?
So we were around, I think it's around 2,200, 2,300. I don't know the exact figure, but like it's a proper beast, the EMEA business now, you know?
Yeah.
So I think about 2,300 employees.
Wow, that's incredible. Imagine that. So this is going to be the story of what it takes to grow from 26 to 2,000 employees in EMEA. So who are we thinking about, Conor? So if we're talking about, obviously, every EMEA business's goal is to break into the US. We've done a brilliant podcast with a guy called Bradley Pastor about exactly that challenge. And it would be great to go and get your steer on coming the other way. So if we're thinking about maybe some of these US wonderful SaaS businesses that have this goal to break into EMEA. Describe to me the type of person that you think would find this topic and what we're going to talk about the most valuable.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting that we're having this conversation, because I've had a few conversations with companies that are exploring like Dublin as an option, and even not Dublin as an option. Some of them are going into London. They're basically starting on their EMEA journey. So a lot of that profile is probably your co-founder that is Series B. They've figured out a lot of good stuff. They've figured out their go-to-market, and they figured out their product market fit. And they just are curious about like what it takes to be successful in EMEA. Like what are the differences? A lot of the conversations I'm having are, like what to expect, like what to expect in those kind of first 12 months. What's different, and while the States is this collection of 50 states, they're all pretty similar, and they all have, despite the odd legal difference here and there across states, for the most part, they're pretty consistent. Europe is a group of different countries with different cultural norms, with different ways of doing business, with different legal constraints, with different individual profiles. Like salespeople are very different per country, and it's conversations that I'm having is just setting the right expectation. Know that yes, the systems and processes that you've rolled out in the States, for the most part, will transition pretty well across. And they did with HubSpot. The inbound engine that worked really well in Boston translated really well across Europe. The same with the sales process. But those cultural nuances are just something that you have to take head on. Now you can ignore them, and we probably did for a while in some countries, but we didn't accelerate as much as we wanted to in those countries, and it wasn't until we took them head on that we got over those obstacles. We built trust with the market, and we were able to accelerate. Good example of this was Germany. A lot of discussions that we had in a typical sales process, we would speak about data security in a legal discussion that was kind of at the back end of the sales process. This didn't land too well with German prospects. They wanted to be very clear on what data security, what our stance on data security was within the business, where we were with that, where we were headed with that, and what our plan at that time was for GDPR. It was really important to them. So we shifted that conversation that was at the back end of the sales process to the front end of the sales process, and it changed everything. Revenues increased by 15 to 20% in the following quarters. Like just little small differences like that are just things that you can't avoid, but actually addressing them is like significant impact to the overall business.
Interesting. Lots we could unpack there. So one is around cultural differences. This is one of the things that people maybe underestimate. And I think that even Bradley said that, America is like 50 different small countries, but they do all speak the same language. Culturally they're different, but they're not like completely crazily different. Like you have, having a French salesperson and a German salesperson, Swedish, Dutch. I worked in a company that had 30 native languages. We're an outsourced go-to-market agency. So we had all of those like working under one roof. So we could literally see, like I can see 30 different nationalities together and how they interact, but they're all working remotely with their clients and their field sales teams and their marketing managers. So we had this incredible view of the complexities and the differences, but also the patterns that were similar. So we could go and create culture and scale performance and share what worked across different countries too. What would you say would be some of the other things that people might misread in terms of the expectation? So in what ways is expanding into EMEA harder than a founder of a Series B business might expect?
Yeah, I suppose like there's a few things. I suppose like you're not going to get the same ROI for every country immediately, you know. So there's just an investment that's required. So you think about a typical global expansion, right? So company leaves the States. They look at a country that has the biggest market potential, but they they look for like similarities. So like you mentioned there, like English speaking is a huge one. So you look at the UK market, they're English speaking. A lot of ways about how they do business is very similar to the way we do business in the States.
Yeah.
A lot of technologies that are kind of our competitive offerings, they're kind of getting good traction in that market. So you kind of go, okay, let's go for that market. Okay, let's go for that market. And that's where the UK and I was a big market coming straight out of the States. But then the like, so there's a running order of merit. So the next one for us after that were Nordics and Benelux. So it's really about like, where do you see most of the market potential? There's all these like typical economic matches that you can do with countries, but it's about matching which ones land best. Interestingly, on the Nordic side, HubSpot's a very like process driven company. Okay. It's, you look at like the HubSpot inbound marketing engine, it's very much a process. And in those early days, we sold the technology for about 10% of that sales process. It was more about unpacking a company and where they were in their marketing process, where they were broken. And here was this inbound marketing methodology that showed them the kind of nirvana of what their world could be. And what worked really well in countries were countries that really adopted that process. And what we found was countries like the Nordic countries, Benelux, they're very process-driven people. They're very process-driven people. So what they're used to, they're looking for the 5 steps. They're looking for the methodology. They're looking for the framework. And those countries that have that kind of thinking and how do you think about their business, it mapped on really nicely. So that was something that we made a decision of. If you think about the running order of merit of the countries, the ones that the process mapped really well with were the countries that we kind of invested the time and the resource.
Yeah.
The other typical ones are probably, you know, like contracts that were in the States. They needed to be looked at differently for like different markets for like legal reasons and that. Localization is another one. So you think about, there's probably a mindset, you know what, English will work for all markets. It's okay. Like English is in most markets. And while English is spoken in most European countries, there's still a disconnection there that you're not understanding their market. So in HubSpot, there was a running order of merit for localization. And what I mean by that was, like, if you talk to every individual rep, they'll tell you that, well, having the product and having the content strategy in Swedish is far more important for me. And then the German guy or salesperson would be, you know, having it in German is most important. So we would actually send this to the States, and there'd be a running order of merit of, you know, what are we going to put in language first? So let's do the German content strategy. Let's get that firing. Let's get the product in German. And then let's look at getting it in Swedish. And then let's get it in Spanish. Yeah. So localization and know that like those differences are coming, and know to manage expectations with your team.
Yeah, interesting. I think localization is a great word because people just translate. And I think that back in the day, I remember us, we would just get the reps to translate it, but they necessarily didn't have the business acumen to really understand how they can get those words right. So we then created a mentor structure of like really proven people in each language. So if you were new in a country, and you knew in your language, even if you were across different campaigns and different clients, then you would have a mentor that coaches you through that process. But I would imagine in today's world, people are just using, well, for years we're using Google Translate. and then would now be using ChatGPT. But if it misses the context, then that content can miss the mark. And one word in copy in an email subject line or in the headline of a PDF or the question can completely ruin it. And the conversion rates could just drop down. And if you didn't analyze that and get to do it properly in the first place, you could just say, well, this region doesn't work. Maybe we'll sack the rep. Maybe we'll de-invest in that area. So getting those parts right to be able to localize it to be highly relevant, highly specific, highly effective is probably a part that people should put a lot more emphasis on. I'm just wondering what other blind spots you see. So when you're talking with businesses and they're looking to expand in EMEA, what are the other typical blind spots that people are showing you in the way that they're thinking about their European expansion?
Yeah, I suppose like back when HubSpot came into the EMEA market for the first time, like it set up shop in Dublin, and like that was almost like the playbook. You were an American company, and because of the corporation tax breaks, you just set up in Dublin. That's a little bit different now, and I'm having conversations with companies that they're looking to set up in London, they're looking to set up in Barcelona. And what's interesting is like just the rationale and what is actually happening as a stage 2 of their EMEA expansion. And what I mean by that is that, yes, say a good example of this is the AI type company, right? So an AI type company are setting up HQs in London. And when you do a little bit of digging, you get an understanding behind the rationale. So 2 companies I spoke to in the last month that have set up HQs in Dublin, and it's because of the product and engineering talent, So London boasts some of the greatest talent from universities and colleges from an AI perspective. Also, the research institutions boast a really high standard. So that's why all these AI companies are like setting up in London. What's interesting, though, is that they seem to get to a point, they're getting to a point now where, we've nailed down that product and engineering talent. That's in a really good space. But when they go to market and they're looking for that tech SaaS experience, it's probably coming up a bit light. Yes, London has a whole host of like sales talent, but does it have talent that has experience of like following a tech SaaS playbook for 5-6 years, being successful with that tech SaaS playbook? And what you're finding of those 2 companies that I spoke to, they're actually coming back to Dublin. So they have their EMEA HQ in London, but they're also setting up a little hub in Dublin to tap up that talent, because it's not just like the homegrown talent. You think about it, technology companies have been setting up in Dublin since the early 90s. So there's this real depth of experience, and people have like come from different countries and set up had their families in Dublin or living in Dublin, and have all that wealth of experience that they're coming back to tap up that multilingual experience as well, that just maybe comes up a bit short in London for now.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It's definitely one of the richest talent pools. If I think about some of the best sales people and sales leaders I've ever hired or promoted, a lot of them were from Dublin and a lot of them are from Ireland. And I would probably guess I spend probably about 40% of my time working on Barcelona clients. I worked there for 3 months when we were setting up a business unit. So I've got a small network there, but it's a very powerful and wonderful network. And I get referred into lots of really interesting businesses, and it's become a real EMEA hub. But the UK speakers that people ask us to go and find, let's say founding AEs or, SDR managers and so on and so forth, probably 50% are from Dublin because, it's the whole like EU and people just want a bit of the warmer weather. But then there's loads of challenges on that side too, in terms of keeping those people, and the competition is so high. So if a business hires someone, if you hire a German speaker in Barcelona, that person is going to be getting headhunted 5 times a week, and if someone offers 5, 10, 15, 20k more to someone who's maybe spent 6 months as an SDR and then they're being offered the chance to go and be an AE somewhere else, then it would be silly of that person not to consider that opportunity. So people find it really hard to find the right talent and then keep hold of them, whereas Dublin's much more established. as a base. So it does make sense. Obviously, people like you, right, that have been part of those growth stories of other businesses from the start, rather than sort of coming in when it was already the giant machine. I'm just wondering, you've talked about a load of things there in terms of the blind spots that people are facing. What are some of the things that you got really right? So when you were looking to expand from 26 to 2,000 people, what are some of those really big success stories that you had at HubSpot that would be interesting for people to hear about?
Yeah, I suppose that the obvious one straight out of the gate is just like going all in on inbound marketing as a demand gen. Like it becomes a really powerful story to go to market with when you're able to go, well, we're our own best case reference. We drink our own champagne.
Yeah.
I think eat our own dog food was used at one stage on Salesforce, which I absolutely hate. But that became just a really powerful message. Like, I think when I started and I was in the funnel as a rep, the figures were, 2 million in traffic every month, of which 150,000 are becoming leads. And being able to kind of articulate that story back and be able to go, okay, of the 150,000 leads from last month, you were actually one of them. Okay, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect. And here's your journey. We know that you have downloaded 4 or 5 pieces of educational content. You've built up your knowledge on that particular topic that you're researching.
Yeah.
And we didn't reach out to you. We let you go through that educational phase. And when you actually clicked on a contact us or a demo, that's when you got reached out to by a sales rep. And that, having them included in that process and being a part of that journey is a really, really powerful thing to go to market with. So that's probably the first one, is the inbound marketing engine. The second one is partner. So if you think about a typical channel partner in a technology company, well, any of the experiences that I had, it was very much, I'm the partner. I'm running the sales process here myself. As and when I get feedback, I'll update you. So, but you just stay in your box there, Mr. Sales Rep. And it was all a real frustrating engagement. Wasn't a whole lot of collaboration. But in HubSpot, it was very different. And for the reasons being, HubSpot upfront put a ton of investment into their partners. And what I mean by that, when you got a channel account manager within HubSpot, their responsibilities were to get you upskilled on a sales process. So you're a small business owner, you're getting upskilled on a sales process. And that is the exact same sales process as an individual contributor is getting skilled up on within HubSpot. So the alignment becomes just really, really tight, right? And the second part of that is that you are skilled up on how to price and package your services, how to make that first hire of your sales representative, how to scale your business from a 10-person agency to a 50-person agency. All of this, like, really, really good stuff. So investment up front in the partner program really gave rise to this. They were very much like our feet on the street, the extension of the sales team, and massively connected. And there's been some crazy stories. Like, I remember bringing on a 5-person agency that are now like 300 employees. When I was leaving, they were turning over about 250K. They're now turning over 25, 30 million. It's just the success stories that just came out of that partner program. But like, the partner program was a massive, massive success for them. Initially, HubSpot was really strong on the marketing side. It understood its buyer personas. It knew how to sell to those buyer personas, and it really became ingrained in the culture. So when this new product came along, i.e. the Sales Hub, in 2014, 2015, it was a real shock to the system. It was like an adopted son coming into a family, an adopted daughter. It was kind of difficult for us to kind of really get used to straight out of the gate, And how we sold then was very different. We would lead out with marketing because that's what we knew. We were really strong on marketing, and then we closed that piece of business. And then what we'd look to do is leverage that relationship and leverage that value that we demonstrated and get the introduction into sales teams and start off that process and sell the alignment between the two. But that worked where there was probably alignment between sales and marketing departments, but more often than not, you were kind of having to start a sales process again.
Yeah.
So it was kind of difficult that first phase of like trying to figure out like multi-product, but now they're actually in a really good position. You think about, they're up to like 5 or 6 hubs now, and that conversation becomes a C-level discussion. It becomes, okay, we're going to talk to all your different departments now, and we're going to talk to services, customer success, marketing, finance. We're going to talk to sales. We're going to understand what the friction points are across all those different departments. And now we're going to like show a presentation to your C-level and go, look, we've done all the due diligence here. And based on the information we have, because of inefficiencies and misalignment, you're losing X amount of revenue. You're losing X amount of lead flow. This is where things are just falling through the cracks. Now, the multi-hub conversation is, but if you're to put your business on multi-hubs with HubSpot, here's where you drive increase in revenues. Here's how you drive increase in lead flows. And here's what the art of the possible is like this is what your future state business can look like.
Yeah.
So that was like they're probably the 3 main strategies that really are massive success for HubSpot EMEA.
Oh, I really love that. I think that it's so obvious that you have this massive content strategy because you're creating that sort of, there was a podcast I listened to the other day and they talked about like the definition of brand, and someone created an acronym around it, which is buying responses affecting now decisions. And it's like when someone's thinking about, what CRM should I go to? HubSpot, I need to go and increase my conversion rates, or we need to go and get a better view of our customers, or we need to get a better view of account mapping. What should that be? HubSpot. It's just like, you like, what drink do you want in a pub? Get a Coke. What beer shall I have? Get a Bud, what phone shall I buy? Apple. Like that's what you've created through this like incredible amount of content. But I can imagine the challenge of that is there's so much content out there. If you weren't really able to say, look, we can see everything about you and we can like understand you and tell them how you understand them, it would be a nightmare if you weren't organized in that way, because you would be like, well, where did you come from? And you're like trying to do this discovery piece, but you already have that single view of the customer today. You probably understand them better than they do. And you would see across an account all these different people that have been consuming different types of content to see what they're looking at, which is amazing. So I really love that. You talked to me when we were having our pre-chat about something that I found really fascinating, and it was about how you organized your teams around personas. So like, tell us a bit about how that worked at HubSpot, because it's so different from what I've heard before.
Yeah, I suppose like we took our personas very seriously. If you think about a typical technology company, you probably have an all hands or a town hall meeting, which is probably like a general business update. HubSpot had a persona meeting, and it was quite purposely called. That would do a deep dive into. So sorry, take a step back. So like it would be very much like a cross-functional view of our business. Okay, you would have people from sales, marketing, customer success in there giving their view based around that particular persona.
Yeah.
You think about HubSpot's business, the foundations of that were based on 3 personas. An owner, Ollie, which was 0 to 10 employees, is trying to be all things to all men, and trying to figure out a load of stuff, and then on to the next one. Has a different set of challenges to a marketing Mary, who is in a 15 to 45 person company, has a good demand gen function in place, but probably isn't getting the results that she needs. And then Mary's world is very different to an enterprise Erin. So an enterprise Erin has like all the bureaucracy of a large enterprise
Yeah.
in terms of getting a decision made. So they were the core personas. And within those persona meetings, we would unpack the sales performance of a Mary or an Ollie or an Aaron. We would unpack the marketing performance so that we know, you know what, as a salesperson going into the next month, I'm in a really good position because the marketing Mary funnel did 150% of its number last month. So we're in a really, really good spot.
Yeah.
You know, and it just became this thing where we like spoke the language of the persona. We would really understand it. And something that HubSpot did really well, and something that I'm only realizing when I've actually left the company, is that they stuck with their personas. They just didn't flip flop, right?
Yeah.
They made the call to go, okay, marketing Mary, she has a total addressable market of X, whatever the case that might be. She has all the pain points that we solve for. We resonate with her. We understand her. Yeah. Everyone's talking about Mary. Everyone is talking about her world. Everyone gets it. So even if we have a bad month with Mary sales-wise, if we have a bad 2 months, that's okay. We're going to stick with it, and we're going to stick on the course. And what I'm hearing of people that have left HubSpot, they've gone into leadership positions, and it's written all over their face. Oh, like we're going after enterprise this quarter. And like, what do you mean this quarter? Because they change their mind every 10 minutes, and you can see it. You know, like it's just written all over their face. But like something that HubSpot did really well. And to be fair, even if you look at the business today, that owner Ollie business became small business in HubSpot today, right? That marketing Mary became mid-market. That enterprise Aaron became corporate. But still the foundations of their pain points, the content strategy that addresses those pain points, and the sales process that uncovers pain, that's all still relevant today.
I absolutely love it. I have never sat in a persona meeting, and I can see exactly how it would have helped. It makes me think of a couple of things. By the way, just for anyone who is listening to this, we've just also recorded an episode with Gal Agger from Aligned, and he talked about the 5 biggest mistakes that businesses make trying to go up market. So definitely listen to that episode. You're in great company, Conor. You're in great company, as they are with you, to be honest. And what you've talked about makes so much sense. Human beings' greatest desire is to be understood. 100%. And if you want to build relationships with people, a core part of that word is that people relate to you. And that's how you form that trust, is that people go, oh, you just get me, you know? It's like the nicest thing someone can say to you, isn't it? You just get it. You just get it. And what they're saying is you understand me in a way that few others do. And maybe even you're able to put language against my challenges and my problems in a way that I struggle to myself. So if you can simplify and help them to probably go and win that business case inside their business, turn them into a champion, help them to go and get that budget signed off, to go and get that aspect of the tool that they need to go and achieve the goal that they're trying to achieve, unblock their business, stop that thing that's breaking. If you can enable people by taking them through a process of helping them, answering their questions, asking them some really thoughtful, challenging questions, and then helping them in their career, that is like the absolute golden way to build a relationship. But if you're looking at a business through the lens of this is our ICP and it's this type of account, and you're looking at it as an account level, and you're ignoring these individuals who have had these individual pains, and you're just trying to market in the same way and throw all of your content at them, it just wouldn't work. And I'm just wondering, when you were in those persona meetings, what did you love most about having this persona-based approach?
Yeah, I think it's like hearing the stories, you know, it was one thing saying, this is our persona, this is the challenges. But what made it real for me was that we'd have a success story, right? And the success story will be a deal, typically a large deal that was closed. But all in the bio was everything that we knew about Mary. Yeah. Everything was that, like, she was time poor. She was spending time on multiple tools. It was taking up most of her day. And like everything kind of correlated, which meant it made it very real when you were going out and you were selling on the phones again. Just to talk to that a little bit, you mentioned there about, really understanding your customer.
Yeah.
And it's probably like a real tip for your listeners. HubSpot did something very unique in their sales process, right? And they had this stage before a discovery, which was called a connect call. Okay. And a connect call was no shorter than 10 minutes, no longer than 15. And it aimed to position pain as opposed to uncover pain. So you think about the amount of time this would have saved in the sales process, right? If you think about any solution, you can distill 2 or 3 challenges that a solution solves for, okay? Like the main challenges that a solution solves for. And that's what we would have built into that connect call structure. And we would have had a good example of a positioning statement was, we speak to a lot of companies similar to yourselves, and that was the truth. So that kind of gave a peace of mind straight out of the gate to the prospect. We speak to a lot of companies similar to yourselves, and they're using multiple tools to do inbound marketing, digital marketing. They're having to log in, separate logins for each of those tools. They're having to report on them separately, and they're just not getting the cohesive results that they're looking for. Is this something that resonates with you? And we knew it did. But like, you think about getting that at the start of the sales process. That is a prospect going, this is a company that really understands me, really understands where I am with a business. And yes, that resonates with me, and I want to continue for this reason. And you wouldn't go into any more detail. It keeps the interest by actually going, look, I'm going to move you to the next stage of the process. We're going to do more of a deeper dive into your business. I want to hear more about that particular pain point, how it's affecting your business, and what's the impact of like not doing anything, not fixing that. That's what we want to do into the next stage. And it created this appetite to actually get involved in the sales process, because straight out of the gate, we were demonstrating value. And what else that does up front is what's really powerful is that it serves everyone. It creates this culture of disqualification as opposed to qualification. And what I mean by that, you can, at any one point in time, you walked across a HubSpot sales floor, then you would hear 90% of the floor going, it sounds like now isn't the right time. It sounds like for reason X and Y, you mentioned that you need a content writer, you need to hire a content writer for this to make sense. Or you need to build out your sales team before this makes sense. So I'm going to give you content that's relevant to you for where you are, and I'm going to check back in with you in 6 months. You think about how powerful that is within a sales conversation. So it serves the prospect. You're telling the prospect, you're not crowbarring them into a sales process they don't need to be. You're respecting their time. You're giving them resources to help them with that journey. So you're actually, as a salesperson, you're building the top of the funnel, and you're nurturing that with relevant content. And then you have a reason to reach out and go, do you know what? The last time we spoke, you were looking to hire that content marketing person. Did that happen? Has that happened? Or you were looking to build out the sales team. Has that happened? So you're not just shooting the breeze. You've actually got a reason to call out. It becomes really, really powerful. It also becomes really powerful for the sales rep. So the sales rep is only pushing through opportunities that have the urgency that they want to fix something. You know, they have that pain point. They want to have that follow-on discussion. They're not just crowbarring something in, you know. And lastly, sales leaders and managers love that process because they have really, really clean pipelines. If opportunities are being pushed into that deal create stage, like they've been really well qualified because of the connect call structure. So it becomes a really, when I'm having conversations with companies and they're telling me that their first stage is an hour-long discovery call, I'm like, like, oh my God. Like, so you haven't identified that you can help them. You haven't identified that there's a need. You haven't done that up front. Well, imagine you were able to do that. Imagine you were able to have 6 of those calls in an hour and you were able to qualify 2 of those calls rather than have 1 hour-long discovery call. It becomes a really, really powerful conversation.
Yeah, and then you're getting SDRs to like, you get paid on meetings booked, which is a discovery call. I'm so proud that my sales process starts with a 15-minute fact find call, and then it goes into a 1 hour impact scope call. I feel
Amazing.
like I'm sort of a HubSpot champion.
You're winning.
It's good. Yeah, we definitely could do with some more HubSpot level content though, which is exactly why we do the podcast. To be fair, so I'm really curious. One thing we haven't touched on, which I'd love to talk about, is you were part of an incredible growth in terms of number of people too.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what you saw as the characteristics, the things that you got right when you were building that very early entrepreneurial founding team. What were some of those things that consistently you got right that enabled you to go and achieve the growth that you did?
That's a good question. I suppose a big turning point in the company's history is so in 2015, a new leader joined the company. There was a new head of HubSpot International. And if you think about, probably one of his main responsibilities was how do we grow from 150 people to 1,000 people? Yeah. And he was obviously looking at what levers would most impact that growth. And his big thing was hiring, and I'll never forget, he posed the question in the room, like, what are we looking for in a candidate? And what, we could answer that, like, similar to the way you're asking me. We could go, we're looking for strong consultative selling skills, someone that can ask a really good question, a really good follow-up question, and listen to what's been said. And then also have the self-awareness to go, do you know what, walk away from a call and go, that didn't go so good, but I am willing to take advice and coaching to kind of get me to the next level. So there was this kind of like job fit. Yeah, do you have the chops to do the job? Yeah. And then this kind of vulnerability growth piece, if you want to call it, that goes, do you know what? I'm not the finished article as a sales rep. I'm very open about that, and I'm willing to kind of take whatever coaching that takes me to the next level. Yeah. And his follow-up question was a really, really important question in HubSpot's time, is our interview process qualifying that? And it was a really good question because it made us look at the process that we had, and we had to call out an example of a question. And I think I said it. I think one of the questions was like, how do you approach your first 30 days in the role? What will you do? Like a typical competency-based question. And like his response was, is that qualifying the three things that you mentioned to me that you're looking for? Yeah. And it didn't. And that gave rise to behavioral-based interview approach. His response was, you are only testing for imagination, and you're only testing for how quick someone can think on their feet. Yeah. And his question was like, is that the type of people that we want in the company? And the answer was no, Yeah. So it was brilliant, and it made us rethink the behavioral type questions as a team, and it was a really great leadership experience for me to. He didn't come in and go, you need to change this, and this is the big changes. He came in and he posed the question to a group of managers, people that have been living that process, and he didn't suggest a solution. He posed the question, and as a group, we collectively came up with a standardized set of behavioral style interview questions. Yeah. And that's very much, those questions are still at the spine of whether you get into HubSpot or not today.
I love that. Maybe we should do like a whole podcast on that specific topic, Conor, because it's so close to my heart. I have a theory. It's not really a theory. It's become like the DNA of how we run the business Tick Talent, which is that hiring is very simple, not easy, but it's very simple. There are 4 types of people that businesses hire. Adders, subtractors, dividers, and multipliers. So very simply, adders are like steady state, come in, do the job, 90 to 110% of target, get on with it, don't really question. You need a few of those. Subtractors, wrong hire, don't have the capability, don't align, cause drama, drain everyone's energy, send you backwards. Dividers, high capability people, can be high skill, high will, which is why that old school model from the 70s just doesn't really fit into go to market hiring. Skills are so multifaceted, you can't measure someone on just skill and will. And they divide. They literally pull people apart. They create politics. They create factions. They slow people down. They create self-importance around things that don't exist. So they're pulling you away. And then multipliers, which you were definitely one of these people. And I'm sure HubSpot had a few superstars like you who multiply the impact of everyone around them. And the best way to manage a multiplier is to challenge them. And if you're not telling these people what to do, they're smart. You want them to come to their own conclusions, but you're challenging them. You're giving them additional challenges. You talked about in your career this point where you were feeling a bit like this is becoming a bit repetitive, and your manager said, "Boom, let's go and take on corporate." So they've managed you perfectly to go and like extract the most possible value from you, but give you the chance to go and impact. And I'm just wondering, when you think about HubSpot, you obviously had created this group of multipliers. Yeah. Which I would imagine by itself became a very attractive part of to why someone will want to join your business, because A players want to work with A players. Yeah. People don't want to work with people who are going to be poor to work with or in political environments. Yeah. How did you avoid dividers, and how did you optimize for multipliers?
Yeah, I suppose I'll give you a little bit of a snapshot into like what we were looking for in the interview process, right? So there's probably two components to HubSpot's interview process, and that's job fit and culture fit. Okay, the job fit, do you have the chops to do the role? And they they really tested for this. So I actually speak about this in an article that I published. And it's very much about how you're tested in that interview process. So I had like 6 face-to-face interviews. I had 2 role plays. And then on my last final stage interview with the head of HubSpot International, great guy, mid interview, he springs on me that we were going to do another role play. And I was like, you know what? I didn't mind all the other role plays because I was prepared. But to spring it on me there and then, it was, okay, like, what are we doing here? Because I remember walking out of it and I didn't know how well I did. I was kind of in a spin. I felt like I'd taken on the feedback. But the reason that I bring that up is that it kind of sets you up for the environment that you're going into. So if you kind of fail that, you fail it for good reason, because you're just not going to fit in. Because HubSpot's going to challenge you within like everything you thought you learned. One of the first things that was said to me by a manager, my first manager in HubSpot was an absolute great guy. I had him for 2 years and he's probably had the most impact in my career. Just a brilliant guy. But one of the first things that he said to me was, you've got 10 years technology sales experience, but I need you to leave that ego at the door. And I need you to leave that. I need you to come in with a blank canvas, and I need you to learn. And I did, and it's the best decision that I made, because what I learned off him for those 2 years is more than anyone in my whole career. And like that coaching and that development is something that I put into tons of other people that came through my team. So, So the points I'm making is that there's job fit and there was culture fit. And the point that I want to make is that you have there was so many people that came through that had the job fit, had the real big deal selling experience in another company, had all the chops, but like had a bit of ego in the interview. Had a bit of attitude. Just didn't fit the culture code. And like, although they may have come in and killed it, they would have disrupted things internally.
Love it.
So it was a huge part of our process was getting the culture fit right, and Heart, like that, it was Heart 11 years ago. But HubSpot eat, drink and sleep their culture. It's not just something that's put up on a web page and it's forgotten about. And you look at it if you're interviewing for the company. The culture code hits you straight out of the gate and will qualify whether you have it in the interview process. And you'll question yourself around it when you're internally within the role. So if you kind of have an opportunity to kind of misbehave in any way around lead rules or sales, you'll kind of question yourself: is that the most humble thing to do?
Yeah.
Am I being effective? It really, really is a huge part of the HubSpot way of life.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I love it because a lot of the dividers, they're not bad people. They've maybe been mismanaged. Maybe expectations have been set in the wrong way. It's one of the major reasons why people go sour in businesses is they're promised all these things and it doesn't come true and they turn sour. Maybe they haven't been challenged. Maybe they're getting a bit stale. But a lot of if I think about football teams, like you take like Manchester United as an example, all of these players they bought from hundreds of millions, tens of millions of pounds. They were the top star in their team. They've come in, suddenly they're terrible. Well, why? It's the culture. It's the environment. They've got dividers left, right, and center. But they were stars. They were multipliers in a different team. And so everyone's like, well, what's to blame? And the answer is they're recruiting wrong. And Alex Ferguson talks about who he used to hire and, meeting the family and really understanding like if they were married and they were going to go home and be with their wives and children rather than going out and partying all night. And they created this incredible structure and team culture that rejected people if they weren't good enough and, really protected young players when they were coming through. It's the same in teams. So I love that they had that step where someone saw the potential. They probably didn't think you had ego, but they just saw the potential that you could go that way. And they just wanted to say, look, this is the standard here. And the right people love that because they want to work in a place that has very high standards and they want to be part of it. So I think it's a phenomenal example. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm just wondering in terms of finishing this up, Conor, because there's so many things that we could talk about. So something I'd love to ask you about is if we're thinking about that founder who's, Series A, Series B business, successful in the US, really wants to make the US successful. How should they be thinking about getting set up in the right way from day one?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I suppose one of the starting points is what does that initial investment look like? When you're doing an analysis of your international business, what does it mean? Like if you isolate your international business, what does it mean? Like, does it mean that 2 or 3 sales team need to come in to kind of serve that? Is it okay to come in lean, like with a very small team and build up from that? Our own experience with HubSpot is that they started pretty lean. If you think about back in 2013, the rounds of funding weren't the 300 and 400 million that you see today with some of those startups with Series C. It's crazy. I think HubSpot Series C was like 12 to 15 million, and if you think about that, probably a lot of that's going into a big office in Dublin. A lot of that's probably gone into their product, so they were really lean in their scaling and rightly so. And what they did that I thought was really powerful, and it's a huge part of HubSpot and EMEA's success story, is that they actually brought people from the Dublin or the Boston office into Dublin to help set up that initial team. And they had a team that started at 4:00 in the morning in Boston and finished at 12. And it just made sense for those guys to go over. But it was huge for the team in Dublin because they learned from people that were successful. Yeah. They were, the work ethic actually is an interesting one. So those guys came into the office between 7 and 8:00 and they left between 6 and 7. They just seen the opportunity and they wanted to go after it. And that as a foundation coming in, it put that American work ethic across the floor. So back then, you didn't want to be the guy that came in at 9:00 and left at 5, So there were so many pluses for getting that team. So for me, the starting point of, having some people from the office of where they're being successful, even 2 or 3, it's a huge kind of foundation for building out an EMEA team. Yeah. I suppose the other part of that is it's just to be prepared for like the localization, be prepared for like the cultural differences, and just like having people around you with that experience who really understands those markets, really understands what's required to like make a dent in that market is hugely important. Some of our initial hires were people that were part of sales forces, early EMEA market entry. So they played a massive role in, how we thought about entering markets for the first time, how we thought about like those different cultural differences, all that stuff. So like those first hires are hugely important. And if I talked about like the 6 face-to-face interviews, the 2 role plays, the in-interview role play, all of that was like quite rigorous up front, but it was for good reason. They wanted a really, really solid foundation team. So that first team, don't be afraid to push back several times. Don't be afraid to give the interview from hell and see how they respond. Because that character is basically the spine of your business. So that character sets the tone and sets the scene for like multiple individual contributors to come into the company after it.
I love it. So the last thing I'd love to ask you about, as I think it'd be a really nice way to end this great conversation, is what's probably one of the most important stories that stands out for you from your time during that amazing growth journey that you're part of with HubSpot?
Yeah, so like for me, like HubSpot is about like it's about growth, it's about development, and it has been like from day one. Interestingly, I was thinking about before I came on this call, like different people that have been successful within HubSpot. If you think about some of the best people that came out of my department, like he's a pastor of a church, and he's actually left HubSpot to take that on full time. He had 8 months of a BDR experience in Oracle before he joined the company. Didn't have a ton of sales experience, but had the attitude that he just was so hungry to learn. He had ticked to that coachability piece on multiple occasions, and because he had that attitude, he's the one that was top of the leaderboard all that time. And another lady that was very successful is someone that worked in the golden pages, like worked in media, like sold advertising space for like most of her career, but again had that vulnerability to go, I'm not the finished article here, and I'm willing to be coached, and I'm willing to be. So to see those people that didn't necessarily have the, the real top performer chops, but had that like appetite to be coached and to learn and to grow, seeing them flourish has been amazing. So one of the big, most important stories for me is that you can make hires based on, someone that's the finished article. They've got like all the sales chops, and you can see where they'll fit in, and you kind of take a chance on them in terms of culture. You might do that. Or do you know what? They don't have the sales chops. They haven't been given a chance, but you see a potential in them, and you see something in them that no one else does. And that was like halfway through my leadership tenure. There was people that were knocking on the door from customer success, knew the tool really well, knew how to talk to HubSpot people, but they didn't have the sales chops. And when no one else was taking a chance on them, but you did, you get such a massive return for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I probably hired 2 or 3 from that type of profile that were 200%ers, that are now going into leadership positions, have excelled in leadership positions at a mid-market level, are gone into the corporate space and looking at their careers go. And you were the one that probably took a chance on them when no one else did,
Yeah.
that's massively rewarding.
Yeah, I love that. Spoken like a true leader. Well, look, Conor, thank you so much for your time. It's been an incredible conversation. I know that you've already started to write about some of your experience and, help founders beyond just like this type of podcast. So if anyone wants to follow Conor, I'll make sure we put his LinkedIn profile in the show notes so you can check out some of his articles. And of course, if you've got a conversation about wanting to expand into EMEA, this is your go-to person. So Conor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Richard.
Good
Really
man.
appreciate it. Thank
Perfect.
you.
To everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this conversation, we've got a newsletter called Growth Magnet on LinkedIn, where we take the best insights from all of these episodes and turn them into bite-sized format for you to enjoy.